Hi, I hope you guys can hear me. Welcome to tonight's webinar. We're being hosted by the SIR-RFS Communications Committee, which is me, Charles Hyman, Justin Guan, an incoming co-chair, and Rajat Chand, the current chair. I wanted to thank you for joining us tonight. I want to thank our presenters for taking time out of their busy schedule to share their expertise with us. The webinar tonight will be recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube. We'll tweet out when it finally gets up. It usually takes a few days. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the column on your right-hand side. You should see a questions column, and we'll get to those at the end. Start by introducing our presenters. Our special guest is Elise Castelli. She runs all the SIR communications and public relations. She's running the social media campaign for the national meeting this year, SIR-LA, and in the social media world, the national convention is like the Super Bowl. So we're really excited to see what she has in store for us and what she has planned for this year. Our first speaker will be Dr. Aaron Shiloh. He comes from Shiloh Vein and Aesthetic Institute. Dr. Shiloh is one of the most active Twitter accounts in IR, and he's mastered social media for patient outreach, and he's built incredible successful practice using some of the techniques. Tonight he's going to talk to us a bit about Twitter, but he's tell us about how he shifted his focus to LinkedIn and why we should all be on LinkedIn. After Dr. Shiloh talks, Dr. Kumar Madassery will join us. He's coming in from Rush. He's a very active tweeter and one of the leaders in social media among academic interventional radiologists. Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Madassery were two of the authors on a great article called #TwitIR. It was in Journal for ACR this year. It's a great resource if you want to read up on some of the things we talk about tonight. After that, we'll be hearing from Dr. Chris Stark. He's coming us from Albany. Albany IR has one of the great educational Twitter accounts. Has amazing imaging, great cases, and really is an example of the educational value of social media. After that, we're going to hear from Dr. Venu Vadlamudi. He's coming us from Alexander CIR. Last year at SIR, he put together an exhibit called "You Know How to Treat, but Do You Know How to Tweet?" Which is focused mostly on increasing engagement. He's also a frequent contributor on the popular IR podcast Backtable, where he speaks as the expert on neuro-IR. And me, I'm Charles Hyman. I'm currently a research fellow at Dr. Tim Murphy's lab at Brown University. I'm going to be the incoming co-chair of the communications committee. Before medical school, I worked as a public relations consultant, and I helped a lot of big companies get online and manage their digital presence in the early days of social media. It's really exciting to me to see that academic medicine is finally embracing that wave of excitement. And I'm going to give more of a resident, fellow, student perspective, so we can jump right in. So in using social media as a trainee, I think most of us have a lot of hesitancy. We grew up in a world where social media was used for things that weren't necessarily professional. And we were constantly warned by our schools, by our deans and whatnot that anything you can post can be used against you, and there's a lot of warning against using social media for professional reasons. So I want to quickly convince you guys that there's a ton of benefits, and it really can be used as a career tool. Things I'm going to talk about are practice building, education, and networking. So as IR becomes more and more clinically and patient-facing, social media really has a ton of potential to make or break practices, particularly in private practice. In the last few years, social media has become huge in academic communities, and advertising on social media is by far the most cost-effective way to reach potential patients. So on the career building side, if your program most programs have some sort of connection with their hospitals. PR people. If your program has a vein clinic, they likely have their own PR people. It's a great way to get involved in social media, just to see what they're up to, see if you can help, see if you can learn from them, and it's a really valuable skill when you're looking for jobs or looking for the next step in your career. So social media, and particularly Facebook for this one, has become a huge central hub of information and really does drive a lot of patients' decisions. There's some studies coming out of family medicine where 56% of patients that they surveyed wanted their doctor involved in social media. Doctors that were involved in social media, they wanted more involvement. It's really showing that, despite what a lot of us might think, that patients are comfortable using social media for more serious things like their health care. I wanted to touch on sort of how powerful this technology of targeted advertisement is, and how, as a technology-based field, it really is a place where people who are used to the social media environment, like trainees, can really have a skill that's valuable and marketable. There's some great studies. There's 2 recently about using patient advertisement for increasing fibroid embolization. One of them came out of Wake Forest, where I think they used targeted advertisements in magazines to increase their fibroid embos, I think 10 times over 1 year. This was using old media. It's really scary how powerful targeted advertisements are. You really can choose, you can enter any single risk factor you can think of for a fibroid, age, anything, to really only show these advertisements to people in your area, people who probably or most likely to have fibroids. It's not only for things like fibroids or patient-facing, for referral networks. It really does give you the opportunity where you can make custom audiences. This is when you enter a list of names, a list of emails, and you can directly advertise to them and only to them. So if you have your local, say, a directory of primary care, people in your insurance network, or people involved in the local society, you can target your advertisements directly to them. You're only paying for ads that they see. So as compared to traditional advertising, it's really just absurdly cost effective. And most of your programs might be doing this already. So if you can ask around, ask if they are working with the team, and see if you can get involved, see if you can learn, and see if it's something you can bring to the next stage of your career. Next benefit of social media, and why I think every trainee should be on social media, is it really gives you the ability to control what people can look up and learn about you. A well-curated social media presence can really change the way that the outside world can learn about you. Everyone Googles each other. If a company's hiring you, they'll probably Google you. If a program's serious about interviewing you, they might Google you. And we all know patients Google their doctors. So one of the benefits that they don't really talk about is that social media websites are heavily weighted in search engine algorithms. So if you're running an active Twitter or an active Facebook or an active YouTube channel, it really will be the first search results, and you don't have to. It won't just be these patient rating sites, these Doximity, these US News type things. A quick example of that. This year, if you Google Dr. Ahn, who's a program director here at Brown, we all probably know he's big leader in the field, huge research, huge procedurally, but you would never guess that from Googling him. So this is what the patients see. This is what colleagues who may not know him see. These are all things coming from data mined or his university. So we can compare that to Dr. Madassery, who's active on social media. His first result is his Twitter. Then we have one from his hospital, which is a pre-made one. Then we have his YouTube channel. So because these things are so heavily favored by the search engine algorithm, you do take back your opportunity to control what patients and people outside get to learn about you. Something we don't think about is that if your Twitter is your first thing that shows up and you click your Twitter bio, you get to choose your Twitter bio. You can say you're an innovator, you can say you're a thought leader, you can say anything you want. And this will be what people are thinking, the lens that people view you through as they look at more of your information online. As far as day-to-day use of social media and what you can get by logging in every day and checking and seeing what's going on is really the educational value. If you look at what people are talking about, particularly the people we have here, it's sharing cases, it's talking about policy, it's talking about new research, and it's really something that you won't get from journals or from just your local program. So here's some examples. We have the hashtag IRAD, where if you're getting started, this is a good place to start. You can see a lot of cases that get shared. We have one here from Alexandria, which shares a lot of great cases. And it sure shows the kind of things that you can only get from social media that you aren't getting from other places, educational-wise. We have here someone's asking, why did he do this? Why did he choose this one technique? So it's interactive. You get to ask experts. You get to really see what's going on in the world outside of your own hospital. Here's another example. This is from Dr. Baelish from, I believe he's at UT Southwestern. He shares a rare complication. He shared video, pictures, and imaging. He even shared some research on some other things. And shows the kind of conversation you can have. He's asking if any other experts have seen anything like this. People giving their comments. You can get some memes over here, and someone suggesting he writes it up and publish it, so you get to see what's going on before it goes through the writing and editing process, and when it comes out years later. If you're not wanting to check an everyday type of commitment, there are some more formal chances you can get. This is the IRAD's Journal Club. We had the first one in December where you share an article and everyone can comment and discuss. These are big in a lot of other fields. It's only going to get bigger. I don't know when the next one is, but it's a good opportunity to get started and get involved. Something that probably we're all very interested in is the opportunities to use social media as a networking tool. It's a small field. IR is small, and the people who use social media in IR is even smaller. So you really are the same people talking to each other. You get used to seeing the same names, the same people. There's a good camaraderie going on. So it's rare you get a direct line to so many national leaders and experts, and they're welcoming and ready to have you. There's benefits for this for programs. There was a study at a UPMC anesthesia where 47% of the applicants viewed their Facebook, and something like 33% of those use that in determining their rank. So having an active presence really can help choosing and recruiting residents and fellows. We talk so much about culture and fit, and it's hard to quantify, it's hard to tell beforehand, before being there. You have such a brief interaction at the dinners and whatnot. So it really is an opportunity to show what kind of culture you're trying to build. And as far as applicants go, there's not a lot of data on showing how involved decision makers are in looking at applicants' social media. There's a pretty old survey in terms of social media, 2012, where 17% of surgery program directors admitted to looking up an applicant, and in a lot of these cases, they found something unprofessional and ended up lowering their rank. Good news for this is if you do have a professional-facing social media account, you give them something to look at besides your private ones. There's a recent study of some PDs, of the PDs in interventional radiology in the first med student match, and in ranking the important qualities for applicants. Perceived interest in IR ranked above step 1 and ranked above third-year grades and ranked above research. I think it was only second to letters of recommendation. So if you want to show people you're interested in IR, there's no better way than showing them directly. I think I have some examples of that. So if you look up the hashtag IRADRes, it's the resident, sort of the RFS hashtag. You can see a lot of things here on the left-hand side. We have research opportunity with ACR and a research grant opportunity from SIR, and these are both posted within the last few days. And I'm on most of the student listservs. I didn't get anything about this, so it really is an opportunity to hear about what's going on and opportunities to have. And this on the right-hand side is an example of the sort of networking that can go on online. Here we have this third-year med student. He was involved in a thread where he was being replied to by 2 program directors, which is an opportunity that you don't get as a third-year medicine outside of social media, especially outside of your own institution. So it really can be hugely beneficial for getting your name out there. I think there's something like 500 people applied to the IR-DR route this year, so you can guess that program directors don't have a lot of time to really read every applicant and really figure out what do you got going on. But if you're liking all their things and retweeting, they see your name every single day. You really could just trigger them to take a harder look at your application and see what you have to offer. There are some roadblocks and some considerations about putting together an IR, putting together a social media account, getting started with social media. The big things a lot of people worry about is HIPAA. As far as I could look into, it's the same as any other communications where you just want everything to be de-identified. Places where people have slipped up before is sort of all the data that is included on the images on the edges, like the MRN and date. Those are things that are considered identifiable information. Some other things people warned about, but I didn't really see anyone getting in trouble for, was if you say the date where it happened, or if you say like today I saw this and you post a case, people are making the argument that's identifiable if your institution is known, so giving the date and the institution. So that might be something to avoid doing. Getting started was the other big roadblock I ran into. If you just start a Twitter account or a Facebook account or anything, you really don't see anything IR related. You see celebrity stuff and sports and things that it doesn't really hold your interest. So the quick and easy way to get started is to add a couple people, add SIR, add tonight's speakers, and then on the right-hand side you'll see this who to follow list. And if you just follow these people, you can click view all and see more about them. It really just pre-populates this list. And as you can tell, this is I added the 4 speakers, and then it only gave me relevant people in IR. And you can just click follow forever; it automatically refreshes. It's really a quick way to get started and to jump right into the IR community. The other thing I wanted to touch on briefly, just a warning that I feel obligated to give, that your school administrators probably gave you a million times, is really this. I really suggest using a professional specific account. Don't use your personal account. You'll see a lot of the IR attendings are using their own account. They sometimes post about sports, or every now and then you see something political. But as far as being on the bottom of the totem pole, you really want to have your own professional account where you keep anything that could rub anyone the wrong way off of it. Quick little example of what's going on. I'm sure some of you might have heard this. This Vanderbilt resident posted this politically affiliated picture. It went viral. 50,000 retweets you have here. For your professional account, going viral is the worst thing that could happen to you. He ended up getting suspended from Vanderbilt in this huge public mess. And the leg they stood on is that he didn't state that his opinions were of his own. So based off of that, you could check your own institution policy, but it might be worth adding that your opinions are your own and not of your institutions, just so they don't have any legal legs to stand on. That's all from me. I hope I convinced you guys that it's worth having a social media presence as a trainee and how it can be really beneficial. I'm going to pass it off to Elise, who will tell us some about the national meeting and what she has planned for that.
Thank you, Charles. Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Elise Castelli. I am the Director of Communications and Public Relations for the Society of Interventional Radiology. And that means I oversee the messages that SIR sends out to our members in the world, including on social media. Our day-to-day social media operations are actually run by my colleague, Kate Martin. And together, she and I decide how we're going to use each platform that SIR engages on to communicate with your members about what we do to support you, and to communicate to the public about what you do to support and help them. So that's our sort of main thrust for all of our communications. In terms of social media platforms, our three main platforms are Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We also have an Instagram account, which tends to come into play during our meetings since it's more visually oriented. But by far, Twitter is our most successful account. That is where we tend to interact with the doctors and our members the most. They're our main audience there, and as Charles mentioned, that's a great place for networking and sharing information about cases and studies and science. And the IRAD hashtag is a great place to get started and searching and finding people to follow and getting involved in the conversation yourself. On Facebook, that's primarily a place where we interact with patients and other allied health professionals. A lot more sharing goes on there in terms of information about IR in like bread and butter issues like what is UFE, what is prostate artery embolization. Those are the kinds of stories that people are interested in and sharing there. And finally, LinkedIn is a place where we tend to share more about our professional development activities, our meetings, and education information. Which brings me to SIR 2018, which is our biggest communications effort of the year, in addition to being our biggest scientific and educational effort of the year. This year, we're in LA, so our hashtag is SIR-18LA, and that's the main hub of conversation about the meeting and a great place for you to jump in the conversation yourselves and get involved. So if you're coming to the meeting or you're attending, I just want to follow the conversation virtually, I would recommend putting that hashtag, which is on the screen now, in all of your posts. It's a great way to show your own thought leadership and engage with others at the meeting. Last year, the SIR 2017 meeting had over 20 million impressions on the SIR 17 DC hashtag alone, which was a fourfold increase from the 2016 hashtag. So we're growing every year. SIR invites all of its members to engage at the meeting. We have a pretty liberal social media policy, and basically if it's happening in a meeting session, it's fair game for you to go and talk about it on social media. We really encourage that, sharing pictures of slides, sharing different experiences you might have at the expo or in a mini symposia or at any session at all throughout the meeting. Some of the things that, in sharing that is you're engaging with attendings and program directors and people of all levels within the IR community. So it's a really great opportunity for you to get your name out there and to be a thought leader and show that you are really passionate about what you do. So it's a great way to get involved. You might want to tailor your discussions about what you're seeing using some of the other hashtags on that slide, either IRAD or Vision to Heal, or if you're attending the gala maybe as a guest or as a participant, SIR-RFS for the foundation, JVIR if you want to discuss journal activity, agile, collaborative, confident, innovative, and patient-centered, which are our brand pillars and really are what SIR is all about, and hopefully things that are discussed in all of our sessions. So those are really great ways to engage in the conversation, but also filter the conversations that you really are talking with the people you want to engage with. We also call every member who's on Twitter, we kind of consider you all social media ambassadors for the specialty. And in being a social media ambassador, that doesn't just mean sharing your insights and experiences. You really are the world, example for IR. So just to reiterate some of the things Charles mentioned about, being a good ambassador, what does that mean? That means sharing, your insights and sharing your thoughts, but also being professional about it. at the meeting, there's a lot of different receptions and events. So we always encourage people just to be cognizant of what you're taking pictures of and sharing. You don't want to show the specialty in an inappropriate light. You want to make sure that, you're not goofing around with equipment at the expo, because that doesn't, portray IRs as the professionals that they are. So things like that are important to keep in mind. And then more generally, when you're outside of the meeting and you're talking on social media and you're engaging with friends and family and you're engaging with the general public, it's really important that you are not just professional, but you're also being aware of what you're sharing. So as Charles mentioned, anonymizing the data and the pictures that you're sharing to make sure that they're HIPAA compliant. If you're sharing a photo of the patient, make sure they sign a release form so that it's just really clear in everybody's cover, so that no one can come back and say you violated HIPAA because you didn't get a release form signed and there's no written permission. So you really need to make sure that you're getting that sort of information out there, either with the right boundaries, within the boundaries. Also, if you're starting your own professional profile, it's a great way to make sure that you're staying in compliance, you're not mixing the personal and the professional. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you ask permission first. I know there's always that ask forgiveness, not permission. This is one of the situations where you want to ask permission first, make sure that it's okay with your program, make sure it's okay with your institution, that you're sharing, you're talking about your profession publicly like that, just from a standpoint of protecting the institution, because there is that sensitivity around HIPAA. You just don't want to make sure that you're not risking your job or risking the reputation of yourself or the institution. Ask permission first. Most places are pretty open to it, and they might have a social media guide that will help you through that process. And then finally, on the idea that, putting out there your opinions on your own in the profile, that's a great way to protect yourself, but do understand that in the world we live in and the way people react to even perceived slights on social media, you will be held accountable for the things you say. So I like to call it the grandma test. If you wouldn't say it to your grandma, then don't say it on social media. So really just be professional, be kind to the people who are out there, and then you won't get yourself in trouble, but you will be great ambassadors for IR. So with that, I will hand it over to, I believe, Dr. Shiloh is next. And he will talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of using social
media. Great, thank you. I don't know if my slide is on the screen or not, but I've made a presenter. Okay, hold on. Well, I don't have a cursor. Oh well. Oh, here we go. Yes, show the cursor. How's that? Sorry. Alrighty then. Oops, I wasn't prepared. Okay, here we go. So, thanks so much for having me on here. I believe that there are some people who believe that somehow I'm the guru of social media, although I don't believe that that's true. I just been banging this social media drum now for a couple years. We had a brief social media course at the SIR in Vancouver. Last year, unfortunately, we had a little brief event at the vendor venue, but obviously it's still an extremely critical part of what we do, and I'm going to show real quick why I say that. So, just a brief background about how I know most of these things. You can say a lot of things on Twitter and elsewhere, and none of them can be validated. But 4 or 5 years ago, I opened up my own vein office, and I was sort of forced to learn about how to use these various platforms to generate business for my practice. So I can speak to that. And then subsequently, I've used other platforms to try to demonstrate my expertise in certain fields of IR. And I'm going to just real briefly show something about LinkedIn, which I think is valuable. Anyway, so with that, there's a whole bunch of social media platforms, but I think it's important to recognize that this isn't going away. If you look at the global statistics from January 2017, you can see that of the world's 7.47 billion people, half of those use the internet, and almost all of them 2.79 billion use social media of some form or another. And so, again, this is not going to go away. It's not a fad. And we should really be at the forefront of representing our field in that way, and in a way that collectively, if we all do it together, the real power of the social network will be able to harness that. And unless we can get the SIR to spend millions of dollars on a national media campaign, social media really is the way to effectively do that, because we all contribute a little bit of time, and that little bit of time can be very valuable to the whole society. As far as platforms, Elise did mention them. I believe that Twitter and LinkedIn are primarily physician-facing or outside to other professionals. I can say that, from my experience in my own practice, I don't recall ever getting a patient directly from Twitter or LinkedIn. So I do believe that they really are professional-facing. But to that end, especially with LinkedIn, I have had multiple various kinds of interesting opportunities presented to me. And I think it's also an excellent way, of course, of showcasing the things that we do. And also previously, before Twitter went to 280 characters, when you only had 140 characters, our cases can be complex, and there's a lot to say with such a short amount of letters. So LinkedIn allowed you to write a better story, and those stories are what really are the things that touch people on all platforms. So if I were to say anything to anybody, the thing that touches people most, I believe, is personal stories, patient-specific stories, not just Dr. Shiloh's having a vein screening tomorrow or some other thing like that. It's the patient, touching stories that really connect with people. So as far as patient-facing platforms, there's obviously Facebook, Instagram, which Facebook owns, of course, YouTube, which Google owns, which I think is an excellent modality actually for interventional radiology, since static images don't always tell the story. And on my own Shiloh Vein webpage, we had lots of videos that I would direct patients to say, here's what it's like when we do a vein ablation, or in an academic practice or others, you could say, this is what it's like when you have your filter removed or whatever. And I can assure you that, especially since we're all inundated with pictures and videos all day long on everything we see, mobile and computer and TV, that people are more and more used to seeing imagery and can kind of get the idea about what's happening. So it can be valuable. And certainly Snapchat, maybe we're not talking about so much, but that's useful for reaching a younger patient population, maybe in our pediatric colleague world. For those who don't know, there's a guy named Real Dr. Miami. He's a plastic surgeon in Miami Beach, and he has 2 to 3 million Snapchat followers, and the bulk of his business is obtained via Snapchat. So these things can be used in all kinds of ways. But I just want to show one thing about LinkedIn, because I've tried to tell this to people multiple times. One of the key features of Twitter as well as LinkedIn is the ability to then look at some data and quantitate your outreach. And the reason that that's important is much of what we do, I would call beta testing. So you send out a tweet or you send out a post on one of these platforms, and some of them gain an immense amount of traction. Most of the people here who use Twitter can say, wow, I posted something, I thought it'd be great, and I got 3 likes and 1 retweet. And then I posted something else, and I got 40 likes and 30 retweets. And so the value in the data analysis is that when you're going to spend time doing something, you get you learn over time what works and doesn't work, or what works better, particularly in our field. So the whole thing is to try to get a return on your investment. So you're spending time doing this, you want to get something back in return, and the only real great way of doing that is by looking at the data that you then obtain from Twitter and LinkedIn. And to that end, if you look at these two things, I hope it projects. This one post that I posted, I want to say maybe, who knows, 3-4 days ago, not that long ago, about a case that myself and Dr. Watts did. And if you look at the bottom, it's just a single, it's an image of before and after of an external iliac artery. And you can see that in a short period of time, that got 6,590 views. Clearly, I'm not LeBron James and you're not getting 5 billion views, but I can tell you that the other part, if you look over to the other side of the screen, you see that this is what Twitter doesn't give you, and that is that that's out of the 6,590 impressions, 504 are physicians. Now, it's not feasible to know whether they're all IR doctors, whether they're in the United States or internationally, but to that end, there's not much that we can do as far as outreach, as far as I'm concerned, to get out of our little silos of liking and sharing each other's Twitter posts, then getting this word out to other people. And I have other posts that have over 1,000 or 2,000 physicians who viewed them. Some of those are going to be family docs. Some of them are going to be podiatrists. Some are going to be surgeons who might refer to you. And like I said, it's international. I have followers now from all over the world, the Middle East, Europe, South America, etc. And so this is a way to globally get the word out there to people. And unlike Twitter, where first of all, this would have never gotten the same number of views, but secondly, even if you saw 5,000 impressions, you have no idea who those are. And I can assure you that on Twitter, there are a lot of bots and that there are a lot of fake impressions and all that. So this gives you the ability to see who's looking at it. And even university professor or lecturer, 145. I've had CEOs on some of these lists. Occasionally it'll be 400 CEOs. So it's reaching hospital administrators as well. So all I'm saying is for people who are using Twitter, which I am as well, take a look at LinkedIn. You can even post something on LinkedIn and post it on Twitter and see how it goes. I do that all the time. And I can assure you that over time, as you gain more followers on LinkedIn, your posts will go further and they'll touch more people. So if we're going to collectively try to get more people to understand, doctors, administrators, etc., what we do, I believe that LinkedIn is by far the most effective way of doing that. And that's it. Hopefully I'll see some of you guys on LinkedIn. Feel free to, request to be my friend. I will certainly follow you back. And that's it. I'll wait for questions at the end. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dr. Shiloh. We're going to pass it off now to Dr. Madassery. Whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and talk.
Hey, thanks everybody for your time. It's a tough act to follow Aaron and his presentation. I mean, literally that's like the money ball of big data for social media and how to utilize it. I think we all take a lot of cues from what Aaron does, and I think we all have a lot to learn from that. Briefly, I think social media and using it has been something relatively new for us too. I think about a year and a half now, we've kind of seen what it does, what it can cause, and what maybe we can glean from it. I mean, a lot of it's been Twitter. We wrote that paper together, and we've been developing this, most importantly to me, this online private community of being able to talk to each other and bounce ideas and figure out how do we improve, procedures, patient care, outreach. And that's been more important for me and some of us than many other things. I think one of the things we learned that is, the platform of, Twitter, and it may not be the best for patient outreach, but for reaching out to our colleagues in medicine, which, as many of us know in hospitals, a lot of them don't know what exactly we do. They get shocked when they hear we have a clinic. These are all things that we need to do a better job of educating and outreach, which I think the social media platform is probably the ideal place to be. LinkedIn is something I think Aaron made a great point about. I haven't spent too much time on that, but I think that's definitely something I'm going to get on. You do get much more of a professional atmosphere there. Facebook, I think, is great too. I think SIR has been doing a good job lately of promoting a lot of things on Facebook, which I've personally kind of sent on Facebook, and I've had people I know and friends kind of reaching out and asking questions about what we do and stuff. So I think that's great, the interventional initiative and such. When it comes to, I think Aaron was talking about referrals. What's interesting, a while back I did get a referral from another state from a non-interventional radiology physician for complex filter removal, and the patient drove over here within a few days and was able to take care of the case. I think that's the most astounding thing I've ever seen from that. I don't know how to expand on that, how to kind of utilize that more, but it did show the power of what can be done with it. As far as what I did, I mean, I hope there's more, but that was just a great example. as far as what to look out for, I think everybody made good points already, which are, de-identifying images, which is a learning process. We're all learning. Checking with your institution if you're at an academic center or a hospital setting, whatever you're at, to make sure that what you put out there or what you're going to put out there is very safe for all their codes and ethics. And as you saw the example of that one resident, I mean, that's unfortunate. But I think people get wrapped up in it and just kind of get wild sometimes, and we have to kind of rope that in and learn how to utilize it in a safe manner. There are hospitals and people in the hospital settings that are actually actively monitoring their own physicians' Twitter accounts and social media accounts to see what they're posting and making sure they kind of make sure nothing's being violated, and they will reach out to you and let you know if there's any issue at all. Other than that, I think the network that we're building and able to build is just kind of on the upswing. We're getting international contacts and networking, which helps grow our profession amongst others. And kind of what's interesting for me is I've made quite a number of great friends now virtually, and then when I get to finally meet them, it's even better. When we had a short little meeting at DC last year, right outside the meeting, it was incredible. It's almost like you're meeting old friends. And that's only gotten better, and people to bounce ideas off. If I go visit another state, I know I want to reach out to certain people and just try to meet them up and see how they run their place and get together. It's almost like you just developed a new network of friends, and it's great. I think there's a lot more we have to learn from this. I think we have to learn how to be careful, how not to get riled up by what other people comment on certain things, and just kind of let it go. There's been many instances of that, and I think that's something very important for all of us to discuss at times. And more importantly, what can we do to promote what interventional radiology does with patients? And I think that's the most important thing. I'm still not sure if which platform is the best. I think Facebook may be that one, but in terms of patients, but I think we have to keep working on that. Since I don't have slides, I think I'm echoing a lot of what other people will say, but more than happy to answer questions at any point later on.
Perfect. Thanks, Dr. Madassery. We're going to hold questions till the end. We do have a few so far, but Dr. Stark, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for inviting me to participate in the webinar. So I'd like to talk to you primarily about our experience with Twitter so far. This is primarily how we are participating in social media at this time. And our Twitter account's been active for about 2 years now. To date, we've primarily used it as a tool to showcase what we're doing in our practice and to help gain exposure to a larger, in some cases, a larger national, in some cases, an international audience. Albany as a name doesn't necessarily have the curb appeal of New York City, Chicago, or Los Angeles. But that said, the patient care that we're providing here, the training that we're affording our residents and fellows is on par with some of the strongest programs in the country. So I think that social media can be a very valuable tool in educating people about your practice or your training program. It's also a very useful as a platform for networking. I've certainly used it as a way to meet other people. Our fellows and my partners have certainly done the same. Social media is certainly, it's an invaluable educational tool, or can be used as such. We can use it as a way to improve our techniques in patient care, to see what other people are doing, see how other practitioners are treating similar diseases in unique and innovative ways. It's also, we're talking about when medical students or trainees should become involved in social media. I think this should be done at as early in their careers, even before they've chosen a particular specialty. I think that social media can be a resource to learn about a specific specialty or a training program. For example, simply by searching the hashtag IRAD, you can instantaneously have access to countless posts about our specialty. If a medical student or a resident is interested in a particular training program in IR, social media can be a really useful tool in helping to guide them towards deciding to apply for a particular program or to seek out an away elective. There's a few things that I think are important when talking about what we should be posting on social media. I think it's really important to know your audience, know who is and who might be looking at your social media account. As I said earlier, what you post on social media can stick with you forever. So being judicious about what you put up for others to see is, is very important. And with respect to posting interesting and educational cases, I think we need to make sure that we're not making enemies in other specialties. Calling out vascular surgery colleagues for mangling an IVC filter retrieval, which you're then able to salvage, is probably not great form. I also think that there's a fine line between showing off and promoting IR. We all like to post and highlight our home run cases, but as a specialty, I think we need to also focus on clinical outcomes for the procedures that we're highlighting. This is definitely something that I've seen more recently. I think it's a good thing. When we're posting cases, I've also found that it's a lot more beneficial to be including detailed annotations, as was mentioned before, and descriptions of how you perform the procedure. This is definitely something that's been a little bit easier with the increased character count on Twitter. And this is definitely something that I've been working on improving with the posts that I'm making on behalf of Albany IR. And finally, I think that social media is a great way to establish and strengthen a community. Something that this is clearly done with IRs across the country. I think it's great that so many people are posting, utilizing social media as a professional tool. And going forward, I think that we need to be also pulling in other specialties into our social media conversations. Tagging IO journals, other IO Twitter handles, and so on. So with that, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak, and look forward to hearing what others have to say.
All right, thanks a lot, Dr. Stark. So lastly, we'll hear from Dr. Vadlamudi. Whenever you're ready, Dr. Vadlamudi.
Yeah, sure. Again, thanks guys for organizing this. I think this is a great idea. And just to start, a little bit of the background with our practice and kind of how we got involved in Twitter. So we started maybe about a little more than a year and a half ago. And I sort of run a lot of the Twitter kind of activity for our group, but all the other guys actually have access to it, though they, I think, expect that I'm probably going to do most of it. But it's been really, I think, a great way, as Kumar was sort of pointing out, a great way to network and kind of have this virtual sort of IRAD family, and out of that, meeting in real life. I think last year at the WDC IR meeting that Aaron kind of got a little Twitter group together. That was great because it was really, a nice ability to meet people in the real world. You kind of feel, as Kumar was saying, you have this relationship with people, and you're kind of now expanding it, especially, that lives are busy and it's hard to sort of dedicate that time, to that networking. So I think this is another avenue. And I found that to be personally very gratifying kind of a thing of using social media. One sort of difference perhaps, and maybe we're a little bit similar to Aaron's practice in this sense, is that, our practice is a pure private practice. And so, we're different in the sense, of course, we don't have residents and fellows or medical students around. And so I have to say, part of the reason, we like tweeting cases, showing cases, even sometimes if it's just interesting anatomy or something like that, is almost as a way of, well, we don't have, trainees with us, but maybe this is a way to reach out to the, RFS, for example, and say, okay, here's some interesting things. And also at the same time, I think it's good to try to showcase that, amongst all the different interventional practices that are out there, I think as trainees, we're only really exposed to the academic side of things, because that's, of course, where we train and where we learn. But I think it's also good for people, especially medical students or younger residents, to kind of see that, there are practices around that, can offer high-level interventional radiology and are not necessarily in the academic world, and kind of give them an idea that, well, there's other options out there when you finally get to that point where you're looking for jobs and looking for careers. So I think that was something that sort of evolved over time as maybe one of the reasons that we use social media and Twitter in particular. I think one of the things I try to look at with Twitter is sort of to learn a lot from other people. I can say initially the first few tweets that I put out there, I didn't know the difference between a hashtag and an ampersand. I asked my my now wife and assumed that she knew more about social media, and she's in the business world, and she told me, she's like, no, we have professionals that do that. I don't do that stuff. I said, okay. Well, I kind of quickly learned, and that's where it was great having, for example, Aaron and others like him that have been doing this for a while, because honestly, you sort of have to learn kind of how to do it, and personally, I don't really use social media, Facebook, Twitter for myself. So it's really kind of more so for the practice that, you sort of just learn how to do it. One of the sort of things I wanted to highlight as well, and I think it's been touched upon by a lot of the other speakers, is sort of, well, what kind of rules should you keep in mind? Certainly things as others have talked about, HIPAA, are there potential issues with your hospital, with your practice that you need to keep in mind? You need to get sort of formal permission. I think is always good to look into. You want to be accurate in what you're posting, and I agree with others that you want to definitely be careful with negative posting or kind of getting into sort of little fights and things online. I think we should try to stay high level and above board, and really try to use it as as a way to showcase, a way to educate, but not try to get into sort of fights, if you will, online, because ultimately, as we know from outside of the interventional radiology world, like all of this stuff is permanently archived. It's there forever. You can't undo these things, and so you don't want to get into the sort of negative side of things. Certainly, if you're using specific patient pictures and things, as Elise was talking about, well, you want to make sure that the patient has given permission, signed, or is it part of your consent form, et cetera, that you're going to be okay from that standpoint. And obviously, you need to make sure that you're de-identifying, you're hiding whatever kind of notable features or something that you can, so you're not revealing any identities. And I think one thing I got this from seeing some of the cardiology guys who are on Twitter, and they're definitely very active. I sort of thought this was a good message. Is they said expect every message to be read aloud in a court of law. I think that's something again to kind of keep in mind, that I think it's a good tool. I think it's a fun tool, but it has that potential again if you're doing things that are questionable, especially if there's question about HIPAA or patient permission. You should probably err towards the side of caution for sure. Finally, I think one of the things in our practice that we really kind of actively try to do is really to stay away from anything that's political in a sense. We really just want to use social media as a education and outreach tool, and if there's anything, even if it's medically politically charged or something, try, at least we try to sort of stay out of it, just so we're not kind of, again, sort of seen in any kind of negative light. So with that, I mean, those are kind of some of the thoughts and comments I have regarding it. And I agree with others. This is a great tool. I think it's a great networking tool on top of everything. And so I'm excited to see how things, progress into the future.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dr. Vadlamudi. Great to hear all these recurring themes from so many different perspectives. You talked about legal matters there towards the end of your talk. So I guess we'll start off with a question here from the audience. If there's a malpractice case and an image is posted from it online, is that admissible in court? Does anybody know about that?
This is Elise. I can't say 100% for sure, but we always err on the side that if it's out in public, it's admissible at the public site. They won't necessarily have to subpoena it if it's not, if it's in public view. So one of the things that we always suggest is that people don't take pictures like with drinks in their hand or things like that, because you never know what will be discoverable in a court hearing. It might be on a case-by-case basis. So if you're on a public forum, generally speaking, it's public information. So it's a good thing to keep in mind.
Great. Thanks, Elise. anyone else have a response to that question? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, I don't know the specific answer. This is Venu here. But I agree with Elise's, position that assume that it is admissible. I mean, I think anything that's on the web, you have to assume is out there for anybody to utilize, including lawyers.
Got it. Makes sense. So I guess this next question is geared towards more of the academic platforms. Dr. Kumar is asking if there's any evidence to suggest what are the preferred social media outlets for medical students and residents. So it looks like from Charles' talk there and just doing a little bit of searching online, sounds like Google and Facebook and in those veins, YouTube and Instagram are kind of the most popular amongst the medical students level and early trainee level, just given the age range there. And Twitter obviously is gaining a lot of traction, but I would also suggest that Figure One is gaining a lot of popularity worldwide. If anyone hasn't looked into that, it's a good thing to look into. Great social media option, very image oriented, just like Instagram. It's basically the medical version of Instagram. It's a good thing to look into if you haven't already. And along the line of Dr. Shiloh, LinkedIn is something that I know the RFS is getting more involved in, and that we're asking a lot of our members to kind of partake in more. So hopefully we'll see a lot more trainees on that to interact with IRs soon. But in your academic programs, Dr. Madassery or Dr. Stark, what is your perception of trainees and their relationship with social media? Is there interest for them to get involved? What has your experience been like with applicants to your program for residency or fellowship? And has there been any sort of mention about social media, or have you been able to perceive IR awareness or interest through applicants and their social media presence?
Sure, yeah, sure. That's a good question. We've encouraged our applicants to our fellowship and residency programs to follow us on Twitter, and so what we'll typically do, what we've done in the past, is we post discussion topics on Twitter in the week or weeks leading up to the interviews, and those discussion topics are often used to start conversations during the interview process once the applicants arrive. And so, we think it's a very useful and important tool for the application process. Again, it gives us exposure to applicants from all over the country. They want to look at our Twitter account to see what we're doing up here in Albany, and again, it helps to prepare them in a lot of ways for what they may come across as far as questions during the interview day when they arrive. So I do think it's useful, and we do encourage it.
This is Kumar. For us, it's interesting. Some of our fellows in the last year or two have developed their own and gone out to their jobs, and every now and then now I see them posting a case or two, which is kind of a little bit of pride, comes from us when we see them doing something great and we can see it instantly, and they're kind of promoting themselves as well. So it's almost like on top of teaching them clinical and technical skills, we taught them some social skills, so that's great. And also in the interview trail, we've definitely seen every interview day that we have for either the residency or the fellowship, we've definitely had at least one or two out of the applicants always say, "Oh yeah, I follow you guys on Twitter, or I've seen some cool cases. That's great what you did." So it's, I think it's definitely grown in such a short time, and I think it's only gonna go from there. And I do encourage all of them to follow everybody and start communicating and get to know. You never know who you're talking to and what you can learn from them, and who you might end up working with at some point. So I think it's definitely spreading.
Great, thanks a lot. So we have a question from Seth Steen. He's asking, does anyone have experience or advice dealing with institutions with stringent no posting guidelines, even for de-identified cases?
This is Kumar. I mean, I don't personally have any experience with that, but I do know people on our threads that we have on our social media where we can talk amongst each other, and they do say they can't post, but they're able to at least talk to us and ask questions and ask advice, at least there, and at least amongst ourselves privately talk. So at least it gives you that opportunity, that forum amongst people, you know, in your own profession.
And Yulun is asking, do you suggest any appropriate timeline of posting a case from when the case was performed to when you put it online?
Aaron, you want to take that one?
I'm sorry. Hold on a sec. Am I on mute? Can you ask that question again? I'm sorry. I was dealing with something here. Repeat the question, please.
So the question is, do you suggest any appropriate timeline of posting a case from when it was performed to putting it online?
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously everyone does a great case, and we're, you know, just super excited to show it. When I used to run the Philadelphia Angio Club, we had a joke that, you know, because part of the conference was someone showing that people were showing interesting cases. And, you know, the joke was that literally the case was hot off the press. Like, people would show up with, like, this is what I did today. And, you know, they were just excited about it. And I remember when we did our first dips at Jefferson, and my attending, I won't say his name, who never went to the Angio Club, all of a sudden goes running to the Angio Club because he, you know, he did a dips procedure with me, and that was that. So obviously the goal, I mean, our instincts and the way we feel are that we're so excited, let's show it off. But I believe that, to others' points, just to avoid problems with any potential, you know, patient identification of the day, what hospital you were at, some information we found, you know, you wait a week or two and then you show it. Now, just as another aside in that is that there's an app called Hootsuite, HOOTSUITE, that allows you to schedule posts, okay? So rather than hitting a button on your phone and saying hit now, hit now, hit now, you can go to Hootsuite and say, all right, even if I'm excited about this case now, I can schedule it for Friday next week at 8 a.m. And Hootsuite, you can even auto-schedule tweets and other posts, and it allows you to, what it does when it auto-schedules is it picks the best time of day to show your actual post, because it's not just about posting. If I show a case at 11 o'clock at night on Twitter, it will never get seen. But that same case at either 8 o'clock, noon, or 5 o'clock, which is a general estimation as to when they post, will get much more traction, because that's when people are using the app. So for those who either don't have the time or are concerned about, you know, identifying a date, you know, go to Hootsuite. I think there's still a free version with limited capabilities, and you can schedule posts to as many social media platforms as you're on. So when I was really, really busy and I wanted to post to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all that, I would spend an hour on a Sunday night and I would put the posts on Hootsuite and let it go, you know, and then you don't, it's not every day, and then you don't have the instinct to show an everyday case. And the other thing I would say is that we don't always have to just show cases or even, you know, diseases that you know, are, it's just so clear that it's related to IR. I would show tweets on fitness and health, and, you know, because let's think about it. PAD is caused by, you know, smoking, not exercising, etc. So by saying, you know, I'm putting a post out on, you know, exercise, and it may seem unrelated to IR, but that gets us a little bit out of our silos. That is where other people live. Those are what people are interested in. Instagram, for example, if you put a tag on Instagram, it will show you how many tweets or impressions that's had. So you put in something like Insta Health, and you'll see there's 300 million posts to that hashtag. And so the bottom line is that you have to look at these things, the data that's associated with them, and use that to your benefit. And so, no, don't post the same day, post in the future. And if you don't have the time to do it, use an app like Hootsuite to schedule all those things, and that will save a lot of time and keep you out of trouble.
This is Kumar. That's like artificial intelligence stuff that Shiloh's. That's fantastic. The other thing I think as a funny aside is that we do have this little made-up phenomenon of the Twitter curse. So I do recommend waiting at least a week after your procedure just to make sure the patient doesn't come back before you actually post it.
You're right.
We've got a few people joke about how, oh man, I should have posted that, it was a curse. So we do kind of say, take a little second, take a while, maybe see how the patient does for a week first.
I guess I would add one other thing is that, you know, not to bring up fake news, but there's no validation on Twitter. And thus, I can show a case of liver cancer and say, here's my 10-year follow-up, but it's really a 2-month follow-up because in the attempt to not show any patient identification, no names, dates, etc., we make our images just of the object, and thus I can show an HCC that I treated, and you know, maybe even I got 4 CTs over the course of a year, and the patient died. Well, I can show that case 5 years from now and say, patient's alive 5 years, so use a certain product because that's what's going to make the patient live longer. So at the end of the day, I know this sounds a little dark, but you have to look at these things a little bit with a grain of salt. And you know, not every tweet is you know, truthful. There's no validation in it. So you know, it's also important to be critical of what you're putting on there, because there will be people who will say, well, really, is that really 5 years? I mean, can prove it, and you really can't. So you know, just be cognizant of those things.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Aaron was just saying, Venu here again. Yeah, you know, I think there is definitely, and you know, we are just sort of just as guilty as anyone else of sort of Twitter bias. You know, we all want to post, you know, cool cases, interesting things. You know, we actually joke, you know, sometimes when we're in the reading room together or out, you know, grabbing lunch or something, that, oh, okay, we're not going to post the 8 paracenteses we did today, you know, well, because it's not sexy or interesting or whatnot for Twitter, you know. And yeah, I think there definitely is that sort of potential for you know, sort of a skewed viewpoint or whatnot, or do we really know what's going on in the case? I mean, we have to hope and you know, that certainly other people who are posting are being honest and truthful about it and accurate, but there's always that potential that, hey, you know what, the pictures they posted, they look beautiful, patient died 20 minutes later. So, you know, how would we ever really know that?
Great. So I think we'll wrap it up here with one last question. Audience wants to know, Dr. Shiloh, are you using pay-per-click ads?
Oh, yes. Boy, man. How long do you have to talk about now? I mean, look, there's so much about this that you can talk about. And so the funny thing is that we think we know what we're doing, but we're really just dabbling, all of us, and myself included, because there are companies that all they do is this on a daily basis, right? You can hire a company, and I have one that does social media for me, and I love them, but they post 2 Facebook posts a month, or whatever deal you strike. That's not enough. So you know, it's insane, and the data that you get from Google and Google PPC. If you heard me talking just a little bit about data analysis and information, the information you get from Google is scary, okay? For example, I can look on my website and see that last month there were 5,000 unique users. 4,500 were from mobile, 500 were from a computer, or even less, almost 90% from mobile. Then, which type of device? How many on the iPhone? How many on this device? How many on that device? What town? What location? What time? Which location converted to someone actually calling you? So maybe it's Philadelphia for me, but not New Jersey. You know, so all that can be found on there. And so, yeah, I am using Google pay-per-click. Bottom line is that if you have a private practice or even an academic practice, you absolutely should be doing it. It's not new. In Philadelphia, anyone who's ever heard of Rothman Institute, he started as an orthopedic surgeon at Jeff, They renamed it the Rothman Institute. 10 years later, there's 7 Rothman Institutes in Philadelphia, and there's 200 Dick Rothmans. That's impossible. He's 80 and doesn't operate, but there's 80 of them, and it was all done through direct-to-consumer marketing like Google pay-per-click, so that when anyone thinks of an orthopedic surgeon, they think of Rothman. In Philadelphia, anyone who's ever been here can attest to the fact that everyone says, oh, I'm getting my knee done at Rothman. And it was all done through social media, Google pay-per-click, radio, television, etc. And they obviously had a huge budget, but they absolutely use the internet to draw patients in. And so there's nothing wrong with it. And, you know, if you're not going to do it, somebody else will. So I know that a lot of academic programs have a more stringent compliance policy, but you should say, look, you're letting the orthopedic surgeons do it, or you're letting the cardiologists do it. Why can't I? So you just have to put your money where your mouth is, get some money from the from your chairman, and do it. That's the way to go. But in private practice, there's nobody like that to stop you. So the only thing stopping you from doing it is yourself thinking that it's not the way medicine is practiced. But sadly, that's the way it is now. So, you know, it's no shame to advertise what you do so patients pick you. And so, yeah, I use it all the time.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dr. Shiloh. And thank you to the rest of our panelists for taking their time out of tonight to be here and put together this very informative webinar. And thank you very much to Charles Hyman for putting together that informative PowerPoint at the beginning. We're excited to have this recorded and be put online to social media, and hopefully the RFS has gained a lot from it tonight and will in the future as well. So with that, we will end the webinar, and just thanks again to everyone.
Thanks. Good talking to everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.